I've been really enjoying reading old books on chicken keeping. And by old, I mean books from the early 1900s through the war years in the 1940s. They're super interesting and packed full of really practical and helpful advice that can help us today. Because chicken breeds that most backyard keepers keep haven't really changed much since those times. So if you've got those older sort of heritage breeds, then these books are packed full of information that's really helpful and helps you to not get so bogged down in the weeds when you're trying to find information on the internet. And I've found them really helpful for helping to improve my chicken keeping practices. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the books I've been reading and give you some specific examples from one of the books that have really helped me with my chicken keeping. A book I've just finished reading is called Keeping Poultry and Rabbits on Scraps by Thompson, and that was published in 1941 during the rationing in wartime. And that is a super interesting book. He talks about things that I don't find in modern books quite so often. Things like what age to buy chicks or hens at, and what you need to do for each age if you get them at those ages, and the positives and the negatives to buying them at each different stage. So 4 weeks old, 8 weeks old, point of lay, things like that. And he actually explains the term point of lay and explains that it doesn't mean what people think it means. So he clearly outlines that when you buy something at point of lay, it doesn't mean that hen is necessarily just going to start laying, because depending on the time of year that the chick was hatched, they will come on to lay between like 5 and 8 months. So he clearly explains that you might not know, and it's kind of an interesting term to use. And that's not something that I've found in modern books or even really in internet forums and stuff. It kind of gets buried in everyone's opinions. He talks about, obviously, the title of the book, feeding your hens on scraps, and talks about ways to prepare that, including using what is in a wartime strategy for slow cooking food, a hay box, which is where you boil the food briefly and pop it in a box full of hay and insulation, and then it just cooks through the day. So you can feed things like cabbage leaves and potato peelings to your flock that they wouldn't eat if they weren't cooked. So just lots of cool strategies, which are quite helpful in these economic times too. He has a recipe for lime wash in there, and he talks about parasite management, which is helpful because he's talking about it from a time before we had chemical dewormers and things like that. So he has strategies for managing and getting on top of parasites, both mice and worms, talking about rotating your run around a small yard and how to put down grass for your chickens and how to keep everything ticking along. So just super helpful information. Recommend checking it out. It is worth noting that if you go looking for these books to read, that a lot of them, especially if they're published in England originally, they have some term differences, and the main one is if they say corn, they don't actually mean corn as in maize, they mean corn as in grain. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at recipes and stuff like that. Corn means grain, not maize. Now, I read these books on an ebook subscription service called Everand, and they've got lots and lots of vintage classic type books, and I find that really useful. I will pop the titles and descriptions of the books with their authors and things like that so you can search them out yourself. Now, this is all not to say that new modern books aren't useful. They absolutely are, and there's two that I think are really essential to any poultry keeper, and that is the Chicken Health Handbook and the Small Scale Poultry Flock. I'll put those details in the description. They're great, but these older books are dealing with a different time, and those are sort of times that feel to me like we're coming back into with all the uncertainty in the world right now, and they're full of practical wisdom that you can just apply to your flock without all the opinions and marketing that can come about when you're on the internet or reading some more modern books. So I highly recommend going on a bit of a deep dive and finding what wisdom you can use to help you manage your flock better.